Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and thank you for joining me, everybody. This will be my very first episode of Hockey on the Spot, and I'm really excited to get this series started. For today's first episode, we are going to recap on the 2013 NHL entry draft that happened about a month ago. To start, we're going to recap on the top 5 picks of that NHL entry draft. Picks that promise to be excellent prospects. And who better to start with than the guy who was picked number 1 overall, Nathan MacKinnon, and a kid who was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but was raised in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Weighs listed at about 6 feet at 182 pounds. A center for the Halifax Mooseheads of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. On the final rankings, he finished as number 2 on the North American prospects list, but ended up being the first overall pick by the Colorado Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche made it clear when they said that they would not be taking the hometown kid Seth Jones with the number 1 overall pick. And the spotlight immediately turned to Nathan MacKinnon, or so we thought. It then became possible that Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Drouin would have been possible candidates for the first overall selection. But in the end, it was Nathan MacKinnon, and for good reason. And he only played 44 games for the Halifax Mooseheads during the regular season this year, as he spent a good portion of the year out with an injury. However, in those 44 games, he scored 32 goals and 43 assists for a combined 75 points, and was also a big part of their playoff run to the Calder Cup, as the Halifax Mooseheads would go on to win the Calder Cup, defeating Seth Jones and the Portland Winterhawks in the Calder Cup finals. And at his age, he is already proving that he can be an established forward in the National Hockey League, a right-handed shooter, a center, and an area that the Colorado Avalanche are already pretty strong in, but now get themselves a little stronger. Nathan MacKinnon also represented Team Canada in the 2013 IIHF World Junior Championship. He played all 6 games for Team Canada, but unfortunately did not exactly have the tournament that he maybe would have liked to have. Only 1 assist in 6 games and 4 penalty minutes. And at points in the tournament, he saw himself playing on the bottom 6 lines and even not getting ice time, period. Wasn't the real spotlight in the World Championships this year, as Canada would go on to lose to Team Russia in the bronze medal game, and for the first time in 14 years would not come home with the gold medal, or not, a medal. And it kind of started to show that this was going to happen. After winning 5 straight gold medals, they started to decline, winning 2 straight silver medals, then a bronze medal. Well, the following year, this year, they did not win a medal, first time since 1998. But for Nathan MacKinnon, that's something he would end up putting behind him again when the Halifax Mooseheads would go on to win the Calder Cup. He also attended Shattuck St. Mary's and posted about 194 points, including 99 goals in just 98 games over a span of 2 seasons. And as we know, Shattuck St. Mary's has been a place that has produced some of the NHL's best. Has produced about 49 players since Joe Corvo was taken 83rd overall in 1997. That also includes modern stars like Sidney Crosby, Zach Parise, and Jonathan Toews. Um, But this is a kid who possesses excellent speed, more than astounding hands, and is definitely going to be a gift from above for the Colorado Avalanche. He is definitely ready to play in the National Hockey League this year. But now the real question comes, what is going to happen in Colorado when Nathan MacKinnon gets slotted into that center spot? Does he start out as the third line center, or does he play on one of the top two lines? Hines. And obviously he will be competing with Matt Duchene for that top center spot. And also Paul Stastny also will be thrown in that mix. Ryan O'Reilly, who also plays center, will be moving to left wing for this season. And the Avalanche will hopefully make an attempt to trade either O'Reilly or Stastny. It's pretty evident that they will not be trading Matt Duchene. They signed him to that 5-year extension. And now Nathan MacKinnon hopes to prove himself in the National Hockey League and make himself an established NHL center. Next, we are going to take a look at the European prospect list's #1 player, the guy who finished #1 in the final rankings among European skaters, another center, kid by the name of Alexander Barkov, who is listed at 6'2", going in at about 6'3", and weighing at about 205 pounds. Born in Tampere, Finland, and pretty much raised in Finland for his whole life, but also contains a Russian heritage, in case you couldn't tell by the name. Pretty similar situation to Alex Galchenyuk, who also has a Russian heritage but plays for the United States. Alexander Barkov also has a Russian heritage but represents Finland. This is a kid who tries to model his game after players like Evgeny Malkin and Pavel Datsyuk, and possess excellent hands and skating ability as well as size. And it really showed for Tappara in the Finnish league this year. He played 53 games, and in those games scored 21 goals and 27 assists for a combined 48 points. Unfortunately, however, Alexander Barkov's season was cut short due to an injury. That could be a bit of a concern for the Florida Panthers, as they were the team that selected Alexander Barkov with the 2nd overall pick, which would once again pass on Seth Jones. Barkov also represented Team Finland in the IIHF World Junior Championships, playing all 6 games for Finland, and in those 6 games he was one of their top players, scoring 3 goals and 4 assists for a combined 7 points. He was not the leading scorer for Team Finland this year, but he was definitely one of them. But again, for the Florida Panthers, they went into the draft with a situation where they knew that Stephen Weiss was going to be leaving, and which he would end up doing. He went on to sign a 5-year deal with the Detroit Red Wings as their second-line center, which opened up that top-line center spot for the Florida Panthers. And if Alexander Barkov does play in the NHL this year, or next year, or whenever he does play, he will be competing with a guy like Jonathan Huberdeau for that top-line center spot. And that's going to be a pretty good competition, considering Jonathan Huberdeau, despite playing for the worst team in the National Hockey League last season, would go on to finish as the #1 rookie in the National Hockey League, and would also win the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year. Has proven himself to be a goal scorer, and now, which really puts the pressure on the youngster to hope that he does not go through a sophomore slump as the Panthers try to reconnect themselves this season. Now, Alexander Barkov, it has been rumored that he may play in Finland for the upcoming season, but is still unsure. Or the Florida Panthers definitely hoping that he comes to play at the National Hockey League level. And when he does, they're going to have themselves one heck of a player here. But again, it's going to be one big competition for him and Jonathan Huberdeau for that first top-line center spot, which is a great situation for the Florida Panthers as a team to be in, having two youngsters who have the skill and who have the skills to be a top-line center. So they both have the potential to be top-line centers, and that's a great situation for Dale Tallon for sure. He's definitely got a lot of work to do in Florida to get this team back in shape. They made the playoffs in 2012. They won the Southeast Division, suffered an early first-round 7-game exit to the hand of the New Jersey Devils, and unfortunately they were unable to recover from that. They did not have a good season. They were the worst team in the National Hockey League. And they had a lot of injuries. That's been a big problem with the Florida Panthers over the past couple of years. Injuries has just been a killer, as it is for pretty much any team. But this kid, I like this kid. I like watching him play. He's got the skills. He's got the potential. He really does. And he's a big kid, too. And that's what you need in the NHL today. Okay? Big players who could skate well and who don't let go of the puck very often. Okay. The next pick in the 2013 NHL entry draft also belonged to a team out of Florida, the arch rivals of the Florida Panthers, the Tampa Bay Lightning. A team that started off the season well. They were the Southeast Division leaders to begin the year, but then they just went on a downslope and finished as one of the worst. They did not make the playoffs for the second straight year, and for the fifth time in a span of 6 years. And once again, they were left with a high pick, which is not a bad thing. This kid was ranked number 3 on the final rankings among North American skaters. There's a left winger, also coming from the Halifax Mooseheads of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, kid by the name of Jonathan Drouin. And for those of you who don't know Jonathan Drouin, you're going to want to get to know him soon. Now, this kid is a much smaller player than both MacKinnon and Barkov, listed at 5'10", 186 pounds. Born in Stay, Agathe, Quebec City, but raised in Huberdeau of Quebec City. And this kid, definitely another skills player and another kid who, in my opinion, is definitely an NHL-ready player. The Tampa Bay Lightning would select Jonathan Drouin with the 3rd overall selection, and a great pick, just an absolutely tremendous pick for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Steve Yzerman had been a big Jonathan Drouin fan for a very long time, hence the reason why they too would pass up on the highly touted Seth Jones. And for Jonathan Drouin, this is another kid who had a little bit of injuries, and he didn't miss he didn't miss as much time as Nathan MacKinnon, but it wasn't that far off either, where Nathan MacKinnon only played 44 games, Jonathan Drouin only played 49 games, so only 5 games more than Nathan MacKinnon. But in those 49 games, he went on to lead the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League in scoring with 41 goals and 64 assists, a combined of 105 points, and was a huge part of that Halifax Mooseheads team in playing on that top line with Nathan MacKinnon and Martin Frk on their way to winning the Calder Cup. Up. And to be honest with you, after seeing Jonathan Drouin play, I myself am starting to like him. I think he's going to be a very good fit in Tampa Bay. He also played very well in the World Junior Championships this year, played all 6 games for Team Canada, and in those 6 games had a much better tournament than Nathan MacKinnon, scoring 2 goals and 2 assists for a combined 4 points. Thanks. And he also saw a lot of ice time, was playing on the top 6, was playing with the top 6, and he's shown how impressive of a talent that he could be. It didn't really show as much last season with Halifax. He only played 33 games a year ago. He only had 7 goals, but he also had 22 assists for a combined 29 points. So, which tells you this kid is a playmaker. He can score goals, but he is much more of a playmaker. And again, it's a winger, so it is a winger. So, it adds to a top 6 that needs a winger. For the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were in need of a winger to play on their top 6, and Jonathan Drouin, by the way, will be playing on the top 2 lines with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the big question comes, however, will he play on the top line with Steven Stamkos and Marty St. Louis? That is going to be the big question. Or does he go on the second line and play with Teddy Purcell and Valtteri Filppula, who will most likely be the second line center in Tampa Bay, with Vinny Lecavalier being bought out and leaving Tampa Bay Lightning to sign with the Philadelphia Flyers. But for Jonathan Drouin, and because he's a smaller player, he's got that speed. It is a true fact that smaller players have better speed. And for Jonathan Drouin, this is a kid with lots of it and great hands as well. And a player who does prefer to pass the puck, but he does have a small knack for the net as well, as proven by his 41 goals. But in the NHL, it is pretty much expected that he's going to be maybe more of a 20, 30 goal guy, but a guy who's going to come up with about, say, 70, 80 assists. This is a guy, and I think he would be a perfect fit on that top line to get Steven Stamkos the puck. This is definitely a kid who, in my opinion, could make Steven Stamkos a much better player than he already is. Now, let us talk about the 4th overall selection in this year's NHL entry draft. The kid who was ranked number 1 in the final rankings among North American skaters, but dropped all the way down to number 4, or 6'4", 205-pound defenseman Seth Jones, who played for the Portland Winterhawks of the Western Hockey League Um, born in Arlington, Texas, but raised in Frisco, Texas, is, of course, Seth Jones, as we all know, the son of former NBA legend Popeye Jones. And this kid, a right-handed shooter, and with this defenseman, you pretty much get the complete package. So for a team like the Nashville Predators that lost Ryan Suter an off season ago, they pretty much have found their replacement for Ryan Suter. But let me tell you something. This kid, in my opinion, could possibly be a better player than Ryan Suter in the future. He was the top rookie scoring defenseman for the Portland Winterhawks last season, playing 61 games and scoring 14 goals and 42 assists for a combined 56 points. He finished second among all Portland Winterhawk blue liners in points, but first among all rookie defensemen in the Western Hockey League in points as well. He also participated in the World Junior Championships, representing Team USA, playing on a defense tandem with Jake Trouba that really, really impressed everybody in the tournament. And he played all 7 games for Team USA. He only had 1 goal, and that came in the very first game of the tournament, but he also had 6 assists, 7 points in 7 games, also 4 penalty minutes. So for a defenseman like Seth Jones, definitely a Nashville Predators type player, and they must be looking at themselves right now and are probably very shocked with what they got. They definitely did not expect Seth Jones to fall as far as he did. I don't think anybody did, for that matter. But definitely a kid who's going to prove himself as an established National Hockey League player, or so he's expected to. A big shot from the point, excellent skating ability, excellent offensive abilities, but also possesses excellent defensive abilities with the ability to use his size to shut down the other players. I think it's a very good skill to have, a very excellent player for the Nashville Predators, and don't be surprised if we see him playing on the top power play unit with Shea Weber. That would be an absolutely dirty power play defense to see for the Nashville Predators for sure. And they are absolutely going to love this kid. I liked watching him in the World Juniors, and for a Nashville Predators team that had a down year last year, this kid is going to be a big part of their comeback for this season. And on a defense group that already includes Shea Weber, Roman Josi, Kevin Klein, and Ryan Ellis, and of course another kid who seems like will play as well, Victor Bartley, who played late in the season and played pretty well, but will now get his first full season of action. And now, again, guys like Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis coming into their own in the National Hockey League. Ryan Ellis, another guy with a big shot, another guy who's expected to be a big-time offensive defenseman for the Nashville Predators. And now you add Seth Jones into that mix. It's a young defense, but definitely a defense that's going to get it done. So, for a Nashville Predators team that relies on solely defense, this is an excellent steal for them, and for sure. The 5th overall pick in this year's draft belonged to the Carolina Hurricanes. The third ranked skater on the European list coming at is a kid who was born in Boden of Sweden but raised in Gavle or Gavel. Another center listed at 6 feet, about 181 pounds, so 1 pound lighter than Nathan MacKinnon, but about his height and weight. Ladies and gentlemen, Elias Lindholm. Elias Lindholm is another kid who I think could prove to be somewhat of a steal. At one point, he was argued to be the top European player. So for the Carolina Hurricanes, I think this is a very good pick for them, for sure. And for Elias Lindholm, he played for Brynäs last year in the Swedish Hockey League, played 48 games, came up with 11 goals and 19 assists for a combined 30 points. And he also represented Sweden in the World Juniors and played 6 games, scoring 2 goals and 2 assists for a combined 4 points, and was a big part for an injury-prone Sweden team, for a Sweden team that had a lot of injuries in that tournament and were without a lot of their top guys like Hampus Lindholm and Mika Zibanejad, who the Ottawa Senators did not want playing in the tournament. For a team with as many injuries to big players as they had, they did absolutely fantastic. They were probably the best team in the tournament up until the gold medal game, and even in that game, they scored the opening goal. And at one point, their defensive play kind of was outrunning the U.S. team. But again, in the end, U.S. would get it done. So for a Sweden team that looked to defend its gold medal championship from 2012, they unfortunately did not do so. They did not win the gold medal. However, they won a medal, so that's probably good enough for them. They won the silver medal, and again, considering the injuries they had and how well they did, I would not be upset with those results at all. So for Sweden, a lot to look forward to. But again, Elias Lindholm was a huge part of that Sweden team. He played on the top line. And this is a kid who's basically become a phenom up in Sweden. And for the Carolina Hurricanes, a team that needs a little bit of depth at center, whether it's coming from Elias Lindholm or whether it's going to eventually come from Jordan Staal, I think this is a great, great pick for the Carolina Hurricanes, because as you really don't know with Jordan Staal if he's really a second-line center or if he's more of a third-line guy. For Jordan Staal, he did not have the greatest of seasons in his first year as a Carolina Hurricane last year. He did not put up the kind of numbers that you would expect for a second-line center. He looked more like a third-line center last season. And for Elias Lindholm, it is believed that he will play in the National Hockey League this year. He was recently taken off the World Junior roster. Both him and Filip Forsberg were removed from Team Sweden's World Junior roster, as both are expected to play in the National Hockey League this year. But for Elias Lindholm, a very good player, very, very good player. I think a great fit for the Carolina Hurricanes. Will definitely start out as the third-line center, but over time, it really would not surprise me at all if he, at some point, took Jordan Staal's spot as the second-line center, playing on the line with Jeff Skinner. So, playing on that line with Jeff Skinner. So, and Tuomo Ruutu. So, I think it's a great situation in Carolina, and for a team, again, And for the Carolina Hurricanes, they definitely would have been a playoff team last year. They took the Southeast Division spot and held it for a good while. They had one of the best top lines in the National Hockey League, but unfortunately, a season-ending injury to their starting goaltender Cam Ward put them in a bad situation, and unfortunately, everything went downhill from there. So, but good news for the Carolina Hurricanes to see both Eric Staal and Cam Ward ahead of schedule from their surgeries. Um, and again, now you add Elias Lindholm into that mix. They're going to be one heck of a team, in my opinion, next year. Here. So that is the top 5 picks of the NHL entry draft from 2013. Next, we're going to take a look at some of the more notable picks from the 2013 NHL entry draft, from whether it's from this round or the other rounds, starting with Sean Monahan of the Ottawa 67s, picked 6th overall by the Calgary Flames. Another center listed at 6'2", 187 pounds, a left shot, born in Brampton, Ontario. He was ranked number 5 on the North American Skaters, but slipped down to number 6. And for the Ottawa 67s of the Ontario Hockey League, he played 58 games and scored 31 goals and 47 assists for 78 points. He had 78 points last season as well. Unfortunately, a bit of a miserable season for the Ottawa 67s this past year. They were the worst team in the Ontario Hockey League. And Sean Monahan was really the only light at the end of the tunnel for that team. This is a very good player, very, very, very good player, actually, who has a very bright future in the National Hockey League for sure. He is not ready to play in the National Hockey League. However, because of the Calgary Flames situation at center, they do not have a top-line center, unfortunately. Because of that, unfortunately, this kid does have to be rushed into the National Hockey League. Unless they could somehow make a trade for a top-line center, then this kid is unfortunately going to have to be rushed into the National Hockey League. Something that the Calgary Flames do not want to do. They definitely would like to let him play another year in juniors, but unfortunately, because of their situation at center, this kid is going to be playing in the National Hockey League this season. And not NHL ready by any means, but is going to have to prove everyone wrong and prove that he can be a top-line center in this league. And that's going to be his goal for this season. He's going to try to not only make the roster, which he most likely will because of the situation at center, but he's going to look to play very well as well. And he definitely hopes to impress the Calgary Flames this year. Another player I would like to highlight is the 8th overall selection, Rasmus Ristolainen, the 8th, who was selected by the Buffalo Sabres, the top European defenseman on the European skaters list, listed at number 4, listed at about 6'3", going into 6'4", and about 201 pounds, born in Turku, Finland. Played for TPS in the Finnish league last season, played 52 games, scoring 3 goals and 12 assists for a combined 15 points. But he also had 32 penalty minutes, so a physical defenseman. But where he really showed his stuff this season was in the World Juniors for Team Finland, playing 6 games, scoring 2 goals and 4 assists for a combined 6 points and 20 penalty minutes. So, based off what we're seeing, the top European defenseman in the from the draft, and this is going to be a very physical defenseman for sure. A very physical defenseman for sure, and a guy who could prove to be a great two-way defenseman. He was selected by the Buffalo Sabres, so a guy who could really add on to a Buffalo blue line that could definitely use it. Now with the departure of Andrej Sekera, a once highly sought after prospect. As he was traded to the Carolina Hurricanes for Jamie McBain and a draft pick. But for Rasmus Ristolainen, the big question is going to be if he's going to be ready to play in the National Hockey League this season. He's a right-handed shooter, has a heavy shot from the point, so is definitely a power play quarterback and a physical defenseman too. So the ideal two-way defenseman who definitely will help a Buffalo power play on the point when he does come into the National Hockey League. Tries to model his game after a guy like Shea Weber, and he did a really good job with it, especially in the World Junior Championships. So I think they got themselves a pretty solid defenseman right there. Next, I would like to highlight the 10th overall selection from this year's past draft. Kid selected by the Dallas Stars, the number 2 ranked player on the European skaters list, Valeri Nichushkin. Who was also the top-ranked Russian for this year's draft, a right winger with a left-handed shot, so he likes to play the off wing. Born in Chelyabinsk, Russia, and listed at about 6'3", going into 6'4", and about 196 pounds. Definitely a power forward type player. He is definitely a power forward, very similar type player to a guy like Rick Nash. And it definitely showed in the World Juniors. He played for Team Russia in the World Juniors, played 6 games. He only had a goal and an assist, however, for a combined 2 points. However, the goal he did score would go on to be the bronze medal winner against Team Canada in an eventual 6-5 overtime win. An epic bronze medal game for sure. I was watching that game. An epic one for sure. And for Valeri Nichushkin, he in Russia played in 2 different levels pretty much. For his home country, both in the major level and the junior level. In the junior level, he played 9 games, scoring 4 goals and 4 assists, a combined 8 points. In the major level, he played 18 games, scoring 4 goals, 2 assists for a combined 6 points. So definitely power forward type numbers, and a guy who could prove to be a top 6 forward in the future. I don't expect him to play in the National Hockey League this year, with the fact that, 1, I don't think he's exactly NHL ready just yet, and 2, you never know with the Russians. The Russians, over the past few years, have proven that they like to take their time when it comes to joining the National Hockey League right away, especially now with the KHL becoming as big as it's becoming. With a guy like Valeri Nichushkin, like any Russian player, it could be within a year that he joins the Dallas Stars, or it could be within 5 years that he joins the Dallas Stars. You never know. So But if he does play, if he does come to play for the Dallas Stars, if he does come to North America, he again expects a very big and powerful forward, and a guy who's going to really excite the fans in Dallas and give them a highlight reel player that they have not truly had in a very long time. They had some decent scores in Mike Ribeiro and Louis Eriksson, and now of course they currently have Jamie Benn, who is probably their best player right now. And they recently acquired Tyler Seguin from the Boston Bruins, who is a former second overall pick and a guy who is expected to be an eventual superstar in the league. But for a guy like Valeri Nichushkin, this is the kind of skill power forward that they've been needing for a long, long time. So I think it's a good pick by Dallas, but at the same time, you can never tell with these European players. A couple other guys I would also like to point out are a couple of the sons of former NHL players that were selected in the first round. And guys like Max Domi and Kirby Reichel. Oh, well, starting with Max Domi, a bit of a smaller player, listed at 5'9", 185 pounds. A kid that is listed as a center, but could also play left wing. He was ranked 19 on the North American skater list, but was picked 12th overall by the Phoenix Coyotes. So a kid who was picked a little higher than maybe he should have, but a guy with a lot of skill for sure. Born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but raised in Toronto, Ontario. And a kid who, as we know, his father played in the National Hockey League, his father, Ty Domi, and was a fourth-line player in the league, a guy who liked to hit and fight. For Max Domi, a kid who is much different, who plays the game quite the opposite as his father did. He's going to be a much better hockey player than his father ever was. Played for the London Knights of the Ontario Hockey League, played 64 games, and finished the year with 39 goals and 48 assists for a combined 87 points. A kid who tries to model his game after guys like Sidney Crosby and Pavel Datsyuk. But a kid who is not exactly ready to play in the National Hockey League, probably needs another year in juniors, but was the leading scorer for the London Knights this past year, and led the London Knights to the Ontario Hockey League Championship. If they went on to not only finish first place in the Ontario Hockey League, but win the Ontario Hockey League Championship. So, a good pick by the Phoenix Coyotes. And the other big son of a former fighter that was drafted into the National Hockey League, Kirby Reichel, who was one of 3 picks by the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was the second player picked by the Columbus Blue Jackets in this draft. They also selected Alexander Wennberg before him, and the Austrian-born Slovakian Marko Dano after him. Marko Dano, of course, the leading scorer for Team Slovakia in the World Juniors. But for Kirby Reichel, a very interesting player. Plays with a little more of an edge than Max Domi does, but not a true enforcer like his father was. As a hard-working player, who was born in Torrance, California, but raised in Tecumseh, Ontario. Um, Unfortunately, a bit of a rough season for the Windsor Spitfires. However, in 68 games, he led the Windsor Spitfires with 40 goals and 47 assists for a combined 87 points. So, a good player indeed. And for what I like about Kirby Reichel is that he's a left winger, a left-handed shot, but he can play on any line you ask him to. If you ask him to play on your fourth line and be an enforcer, he'll do that. Not as much as his father, but he'll do that. If you need him to play on your third line and be a shutdown player, he'll do that. If you need him to play on either your first or second line and be a scorer, he will do that. So a very complete player for sure by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and a guy who I think has a very bright future in the National Hockey League. Finished 17th in his final rankings on the North American Skaters list. Yes, so definitely a kid to look forward to. And the final first round pick I would also like to pay attention to is the 30th overall selection, Ryan Hartman, who was selected by the Chicago Blackhawks. And I like Ryan Hartman a lot. A right winger, a right-handed shot. Not a size guy, 5'11", 185 pounds. Born in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, but raised in Chicago, Illinois. Finished much higher on his final rankings than he was picked. He finished 16th in the final rankings, but was picked 30th. So dropped down a lot. Was very lucky. The final pick of the first round, and was one of the bigger players and though a small guy, was one of the bigger players for the Plymouth Whalers this year of the Ontario Hockey League. Played 56 games, scoring 23 goals and 37 assists for a combined 60 points, but also finished the season with 120 penalty minutes. So, a guy who tries to model his game after a guy like Jonathan Toews, but realistically, this is a Ryan Callahan, Dustin Brown type player. Here definitely reminds me of guys like Ryan Callahan, Dustin Brown, David Backes, Ryan Malone to a lesser extent. These are all American kids who are all hard-working players in the league that score, all Americans. So going into his roots a little bit also, but if you want to go a little out of his roots, maybe a guy like Ryan Clough when he's playing at his best. Maybe a guy like David Clarkson when he's scoring. And maybe to the least extent of all, maybe a guy like Cal Clutterbuck, who doesn't score a whole lot, scores a little bit, but a guy who can change the pace of a game with his physical play. So I think for the future of the Chicago Blackhawks, a guy who has the potential to be a second-line right winger, but nothing more than that. He's not a top-line guy. He is a second-line guy at best. As it's going to be a while before he joins the National Hockey League, but when he does, the Chicago Blackhawks are going to have themselves one hard-working player for sure. And a guy who also represented Team USA in the World Juniors, played 7 games, and scored 2 goals and 1 assist for a combined 3 points. But he had 16 penalty minutes, and despite the lack of scoring, though, he was one of the better players just because of his physical play. He changed games a lot and really wore the other teams down. Was one of the bigger reasons, in my opinion, why USA beat Canada the way they did. So, definitely a player to watch out for. in the future. Um, in the future. Um, and there are a lot more players who were selected this year, but um, there are a lot of steals in the draft for sure. I look at a guy like Miro Aaltonen, who was picked by the Anaheim Ducks in the 6th round. A guy who could prove to be a huge steal for the Anaheim Ducks based off the talks about him. Obviously, a lot of other sons of former NHLers that were picked, like Adam Tambellini, brother of Jeff Tambellini, and the second son of Steve Tambellini, who was picked by the New York Rangers. There's um, there's among others as well. But one player, one later round pick, not in the first round, that I would like to highlight is the top ranked goaltender from this year's draft, Zachary Fucale, who was the second pick in the 2nd round for the Montreal Canadiens. He was the starting goaltender for the Halifax Mooseheads. One of the very reasons why they won the Calder Cup the way they did. Played 55 games this past year and finished the year with 45 wins, with a very impressive 45 wins, and had finished the season with a 2.35 goals against average. So, and also had 2 shutouts and a .909 save percentage. So, he definitely proved himself for the Halifax Mooseheads this year. And for the Montreal Canadiens, who already have a very good goaltender in Carey Price and a solid backup in Peter Budaj, now have another goaltender to fall back upon if the need calls for it. The number 1 ranked goaltender among North American goaltenders, 6'1", 181 pounds, born in Laval, Quebec City, but raised in Rosemere. The 36th overall selection, is a left-handed catcher. But again, this is a goaltender who does like to use his body a lot to stop pucks. And I think a guy who, right now, as far as prospect goaltending, all the talks are revolving around the young American Anaheim Ducks prospect, John Gibson. However, it would not surprise me at all if this kid would eventually steal John Gibson's glory at some point in time. He will be playing for Team Canada in the World Juniors this year. He will most likely be their starting goaltender as well. That would not surprise me, but definitely a kid to watch out for in the future. And I think a kid who could be an excellent goaltender for sure. Some other really good players in the draft half this year. You look at going back to the first round, maybe a kid like Anthony Mantha, who was a big kid and a pure goal scorer. Kid like Adam Ernie, who was picked by the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2nd round. Probably the most improved player from the draft. And based off what I've seen, a game changer for sure. Valentin Zykov, a 40-goal scorer for the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Nicholas Petan, another pure goal scorer, smaller player for the Portland Winterhawks. You got Tyler Bertuzzi, who is the nephew of Todd Bertuzzi. Going back much higher up into the first round, Darnell Nurse, a defenseman, picked 7th overall, picked by the Edmonton Oilers. He is the nephew of former NFL star Donovan McNabb. So yes, a lot of sons and nephews of former athletes on this list. Definitely can tell you how big the sport of hockey is starting to become. And that is pretty much what I really need to talk about here. Oh, one other notable pick I probably should mention before I wrap this up. A kid who was picked in the 4th round, 115th overall by the Vancouver Canucks, Jordan Subban, or Jordy Subban as he's liked to be called. He is the final member of the Subban family, a defenseman like the oldest of the brothers, PK Subban. And he was a member of the Belleville Bulls of the Ontario Hockey League. A small defenseman for sure, 5'8", 170 pounds. Don't see that often in a defenseman. Born in Toronto, Ontario, but raised in Rexdale, Ontario. But a right-handed shooter, the 55th ranked player among North American skaters. And why I wanted to bring up this kid is because of how big the Subban family is becoming. And he actually, despite being a small player, has a good offensive pedigree. He played 68 games last year for the Belleville Bulls, scoring 15 goals and 36 assists in 51 games, and he also had 47 penalty minutes. Now, it'll definitely be some time before this kid comes up and plays in the NHL, but I don't doubt any of the members of the Subban family. And according to PK Subban of the Montreal Canadiens, he claims that this kid is a much better player, defenseman, than him, and could actually potentially be the best of the Subban brothers. That is yet to be seen, but this is a kid who, quite very honestly, I'm looking forward to. When I saw him play in the prospects game, I thought he was a very good player for Team Cherry, I believe. And definitely a skilled athlete for sure. And a kid I think will be eventually a good defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks. That is, of course, if he does not get traded at some point, as lower round picks do tend to get sometimes. So, I think wherever he comes up, he'll be a good player for sure. And that is basically it for today. Thank you guys for watching this video, my first video blog. For tomorrow's episode, we are going to recap on free agency as well as all of the trades that have happened in the NHL so far. And then get ready for August, because when August comes around, I will be following up on the 30 teams in 30 days, recapping all of the individual teams, and will be doing videos on each of the teams. And eventually I will also talk about the Olympics as well. Looking forward to that. And yeah, can't wait for the season to start. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks a lot. And this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and this has been Hockey on the Spot. So this is Brandon Barenfeld signing off. Have a great day. Good night.